Yo, what's good? Big Z here, and today I'm going to show you how to make this. That's my remake of On Your Own by Hayden, Cassian, and Elderbrook. Those guys are three of my favorite artists, so seeing them all collab on the same track is awesome. Go check out the full thing if you haven't heard it yet. That one section doesn't do it justice. There's also the first drop that's an octave down. It sounds really cool. This track is such a good example of how you can make a drop sound huge by keeping things simple. I've learned the key is really not to use too many layers and to use the right processing on the few layers that you do have. If we look at the drop, you can really just divide it into the lead, the bass, and the drums. So let's start with the lead. If I take all the external processing off the lead, here's what it sounds like. It's just a simple saw wave in Serum with a little compression on it. But then if we add the right amount of processing and layering, we get this. And when I say the right amount of processing, I'm just talking about not overdoing anything. Like we could have put the Serum compressor in multiband mode, but that makes the highs sound really harsh. We want a smoother sound than that, a more natural sound. Let's go through this external processing. It's a lead, so we want it to be nice and wide. So we're going to add some stereo imaging. After that, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of saturation. Then we'll add a compressor. And notice how these are all just small changes that end up adding up to a big difference at the end. Next, we have an EQ that's just rolling off some of that harsh high end to make it smoother. But notice how it's still taking up the full frequency spectrum from like 100 hertz all the way to like 12,000 hertz. It's a lead, so we still want it to take up most of the frequency spectrum and a lot of the stereo field too. Then I like to do this little reverb trick. You take a really short plate reverb, but you keep the mix pretty low, and it makes it sound like the synth was recorded at a little room instead of just going straight from the computer. And even though we rolled off the high end earlier, I still want it to be nice and crispy, so that's why we have this white noise layer. Now I could have just added the white noise onto the original lead preset, but it gives me a lot more control if I just totally separate it into its own preset. And because there aren't too many layers in the mix, we have so much space to add a big reverb and delay. But instead of using a delay send, it sounded to me like the delay should only be on the lowest notes of the melody. That's why I have this separate track where I just duplicated the lead and added this delay at 100% wet. And it's a ping pong delay, so it adds so much width to the track. And to add a little more depth, we have this extra lead layer that's just an octave up and is more detuned. Let's get into the bass. I love how deep the bass sounds with these drums. So in Serum and Oscillator A, we just have a simple saw wave. And then in Oscillator B, we have a different type of saw wave with two voices of unison. So it's just on the left and right side to make that wider. And we're only sending Oscillator B through this high pass filter just so it doesn't let any sub frequencies through to compete with the main layer. And then over here, we're just adding some multiband compression, and we have this envelope right here that's modulating the filter cutoff. Now listen to the bass without these 2 extra plugins I added. Now after. If you look at the frequencies coming from this bass, it's really deep. The root frequency is around like 40 hertz. So to make the tone better, what you want to do is boost around like 100 to 250 hertz. But instead of using an EQ to do that, I like to use saturation. So I'm just saturating that one section from like 80 hertz to 250 hertz. And I'm also boosting that level too. Now for the drums. I've used a clap and an open hat that are actually from my new sample pack. Then I've layered that open hat with a shaker and a closed hat. Then all of these layers down here are to add groove and keep the rhythm going. So from now on, for each remake I do, I'm going to put together a package with the project file, drum samples, presets, mix stems, MIDI files, and screenshots of processing for the synths. That way you don't need to use Logic or have all these plugins. You can just use the mix stems or use the drum samples. You can get that below if you're interested. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.